much for joining us. Really appreciate this. And the Equity Gap Micro Summit series is being brought to you by, produced by the Council of State Governments Eastern Regional Conference, the Council on Communities of Color more specifically, and being done in conjunction with the VENode.com. I want to also thank Debbie Allen Page, who is the director for the Council on Communities of Color, and also Chair State Senator Kevin Parker. I want to thank their time and their commitment to this. For more information on the Council of State Governments Eastern Regional Conference, Council on Communities of Color, go to csg-erc.org for more information. Once again, I'm Charles Ellison. Normally, each day, well, near daily, I'm the host, executive producer of Reality Check on WURD Radio, which is based in Philly. I'm based in Washington, D.C. Reality Check is a daily public affairs show on WURD every Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. You can catch me on twitter.com at Ellison Report, and just join in on the digital discourse at hashtag Reality Check. Let's get started with our discussion. We've got a good one lined up for you today. Some of you are still entering the Micro Summit room or Micro Summit convening room or chamber. You can participate in this discussion through Zoom group chat. You will see the Zoom group chat. I see several of you have already, but the Zoom group chat at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you have comments or questions during the duration of this conversation, feel free to chime in. You can do that through Zoom group chat. We appreciate that. Or you can even tag me at Ellison Report as well. Once again, csg-erc.org for more on the Council of State Governments, and more information coming to you soon about an upcoming summit on Friday, August the 21st, an issue summit that's being presented by the Council on Communities of Color. We'll give you information on that a little bit later on. So our discussion, our topic for today is Black business. What is the survival plan? And we've put together an expert panel or a panel of expert guests, folks who are practitioners, who are also owners, business owners, and policymakers who are paying very close attention to the very dicey economic climate that we're in. And that's especially having a very negative or a very disproportionately negative impact on Black businesses or Black-owned businesses. And joining us here today to talk more about that is Connecticut State Representative Robin Porter, who also chairs the Labor and Commerce Committee, if I'm not mistaken, for the Connecticut State House of Representatives. Also, Jillian Sargent Allen is Executive Director of Rising Tide Capital. She's joining us here as well on panel. Tara Dowdell of the Tara Dowdell Group, also joining us, small business owner. And Adina Bayo is the owner of the Adina Bayo Group or restaurant group, owns a series of restaurants throughout the New York metropolitan area. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. She's also joining us here on panel. Martin Pratt, is the founder and also chief editor of Philly YBN, longtime digital strategist and small business owner, entrepreneur, keeping a very close eye on what's happening in the small business space, particularly in the Northeast and the Philly metro area. So let's go ahead and get started. Representative, I want to start with you on this and wanted you to give your candid assessment of what you're seeing in terms of the impact of coronavirus, of this pandemic and this very uncertain time on the small business space in general, especially what you're seeing in a state like Connecticut.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you for having me this morning. What I will say is that what we've seen happen in communities of color, specifically Black communities overall with COVID, the disproportionate impact has been no different of an impact when it comes to Black business. Black businesses are suffering, due to COVID because of the weaker financial conditions that they had pre-COVID, the fact that they have weaker bank relationships and pre-existing funding gaps. There's been a compound of issues that have helped to unfortunately exacerbate what Black business owners are having to deal with during COVID and unfortunately, post-COVID, what we're looking at as we come out of COVID. what will be the obstacles that need to be addressed and what kind of barriers need to come down. So here in Connecticut, we are looking at all of those things and really trying to project how we address the pre-COVID issues, right? Because these were issues that Black business owners had prior to COVID.
Right.
That, you know, it's shined a light, a very bright light on the disparities and the disenfranchisement and the marginalization of these businesses, particularly because many of them are in communities that are already at a disadvantage, and that was a disadvantage pre-COVID. So that's a lot of what we're seeing here and what the challenges are in reopening. The financial impact that has been done to consumers and communities where these businesses exist is a challenge because people are having to decide, you know, how, when, and where they're going to spend their money. The one thing that I will say about what I'm seeing here in Connecticut that does make me proud is that there is a tremendous push to seek out Black businesses and to do business with them and to help them, you know, come back, because a lot of them are struggling. Many of them are facing the possibility of having to close their doors. So there's a lot of groundswell and grassroots work that is going on right now in Black and Brown communities to make sure that we're supporting them in ways that we can, like
right. Jillian, chime in here. Give us some of your perspective, the perspective of a nonprofit that acts as a incubator for Black entrepreneurs, folks who are looking at stepping into the small business arena. What are you seeing? You're based in Jersey, North Jersey, I believe, and so you're seeing a lot of what's happening in the small business space in Northern Jersey, the New York metropolitan area. What's that experience like right now?
Thanks so much, Charles. I appreciate you having me on. So just a little bit about Rising Tide Capital. For 15 years, we've been addressing the deep economic challenges of under-resourced households and communities, primarily Black and Brown, using the transformational power of entrepreneurship. So we teach folks how to start and grow their businesses and provide them the support throughout to make sure that they are successful in their business. What we are seeing is our entrepreneurs. We've got a few programs, and we have our flagship program is the Community Business Academy, which teaches folks how to get their business off the ground. Our graduates are at 3,000, just over 3,000, and our small businesses are indeed struggling. Like Representative Porter said, they're struggling in the access to capital space. They're struggling in the opportunities for additional contracts. A few of our entrepreneurs have shut their doors. Actually, more than a few, a good percentage of them have, as a result of this current condition. And as we all know, that it's just a reinforcing and an exacerbating of an issue that was already very vulnerable and very fragile. So we are using our space as Rising Tide Capital as a community in support of those entrepreneurs and keeping them really close, understanding what their needs are so we can advocate for them with our funders. And we've been able to get cash directly into their pockets, especially early on in the crisis, so that they could get some ease on the funding side and the loss of revenue side, so they can not worry so much about that and support their families at home. But we have amped our services in support of our entrepreneurs, really focusing on the crisis response and then the actual recovery piece. So we primarily work with our own entrepreneurs within our network to provide them with business strategy support, one-on-one coaching beyond our Community Business Academy, one-on-one coaching to keep them kind of on path to get to their end goal, helping them with marketing support and accounting support. But we have the access to capital space where we prepare our entrepreneurs one-on-one to create that package for a loan application so that they can successfully submit and be funded through our network of lenders. In the state of New Jersey, there's been significant money coming down through the state government that has been just challenging for our entrepreneurs to access easily. So we are standing in the gap there, helping to support our entrepreneurs in the getting of money and getting that cash. So that's the work we've been doing for the past few months. Yep.
Right. Adina, I'm real curious, what's that experience been like for you through this pandemic? And there's a lot of uncertainty out there. You own a chain of restaurants from Jersey all the way down to Pennsylvania. So what's that been like, particularly in a space that's been as disrupted and as impacted as the restaurant business? How have you had to recalibrate here and come up with new strategies for survival?
Well, good morning to everyone, to the panelists. It's an honor to be on this panel with you all. I think that if I was to sum up my experience right now as a restaurateur, my experience as a Black business owner, my experience as a Black woman business owner, right now, I would say that no different than what my ancestors had to deal with 100 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that disproportionately, COVID was something that hit the Black community very hard. And as many resources that was put out there, those resources weren't designed with us in mind. So when you hear statistics that PPP only touched less than 20% of Black businesses, I'm not surprised, right? When you hear statistics that about 41% of Black businesses may not come back to run their businesses, I'm not shocked by that. Disproportionately, we as Black businesses in this country have had to build from our own bootstrap. We have had to borrow or dig into our 401k plan to start a new business. We have had to do so many things on our own, but we're told struggle is part of the process, right? We are told that help is on the way, but oftentimes that help is too late. Sometimes it doesn't come. I tell you, my experience have been very, very dramatic in the sense that I have over 100 people, over 100 people employed in my organization, right? And I'm worried about them because they went from invisible workers to essential workers to heroes. How many times do you go in your restaurant and you look at your waitress with no thoughts, or the cashier that's ringing up your food in the grocery line? But as the pandemic happened, we were the heroes. We were the one delivering foods to keep this country going. We were the one that still was forced to come out of our houses and still be of service. But when this help was designed, we weren't designed with it in mind, right? So when PPP came out, I had already designed my own PPP plan. I had already told my staff that regardless of what happened, I was going to cover their salary for at least a month. And I did that. I told my community that I have IHOPs. I will turn my IHOPs that are not empty into community feeding banks. So what I did, I gave out almost 10,000 free pancakes to members of my community. I told the young kids that was locked out of the school system, knowing that some of them, their only access to lunch is the free school lunch. We give out almost $8,000 free school lunches to parents that came to all of the stores. And then we also said there are seniors that are locked in their house because there was the highest risk when it came to COVID. We delivered dinners to seniors. And I say all of this to say that Black entrepreneurs have always been the backbones of the Black community.
Yeah. Let me, and Adina, thank you for that too. Tara, you you have a small business, but you're also advising, giving consultation to a lot of small businesses, a lot of Black small businesses. And so one, what's that been like, you having to balance your own priorities and especially the urgency of the time that we're in now, and you have employees as well, but also trying to provide that type of guidance in a really desperate time like this to your clients?
Well, it's a struggle. It is a struggle, and I cannot I cannot overstate that. Right? It is a struggle, and a lot of our clients are, to Adina's point. Adina is a client, and a lot of our clients are doing the things that need to happen to help to mitigate the struggle that's going on, as Adina so effectively stated just now. And so I think that's part of the story that doesn't get told. So a lot of our Black owned businesses are the businesses that step up in times of turmoil, in times of crisis.
Mhm.
And what is most concerning to me is that it's not just, as Adina said, these programs are not designed for us, right?
Mhm.
That's point one. The resources that are available are not available in a way that's accessible to us. But the other side of that story is, while we're dealing with a set of disparities on multiple levels, but not the least of which financial in the economic infrastructure of this country, we're also dealing with being demonized when we ask to have those policies that don't include us adjusted to include us. We are demonized. And the stories like Adina, we've been helping to tell Adina's story, but there's a lot of Adinas out there who are stepping up in times of crisis. There are a lot of Black business owners that, if it were not for that storefront, it would be vacant. And there would be all kinds of problems in the community that come about from that. And so I want to make sure that, just from a practical standpoint, that we as Black people recognize what our Black businesses do for us, right? Because I hear a lot of folks saying things that are counterproductive about Black businesses. And so I just want to make a point. We pay taxes. We operate healthcare. We're doctors. We have healthcare companies. We have healthcare practices. We have educational facilities, early childhood centers. So our business, and that's just one of many things. I'm just citing a few different examples. So we need to be careful that we don't play into the dominant narratives about our own businesses, because our businesses are doing tremendous things. So that's one point I want to make. And so we have to start with us, right? It all has to start with us, and we have to be there to push for change, but we also have to make sure that change happens within our own community. We need to push for it externally, but we need to also ensure that within our community, we're doing what needs to happen to support our businesses and to stand up for our businesses and to tell the truth about the impact of our businesses on our community, and not just on our community, on America. And so I just, that's something obviously I came to say, Charles.
Right. Hey, Martin, what's your thoughts on this, and when does that step up, or how does that step up moment happen? I want to transition this discussion from some of the experiences that people have been feeling out there on the landscape, and then see, okay, well, what are some strategies, what are some techniques, solutions that we can grab onto, solutions that can happen in that space by the practitioners, the entrepreneurs, the owners, also strategy solutions that can be presented by the policymakers. We'll get to you, State Representative, very soon. But Martin, where do we now transition into that step up moment?
Well, Charles, thank you for allowing me to be part of this conversation. Before COVID, I was very interested in what the Federal Reserve Bank, particularly out of Omaha, was tracking Black women businesses for the last, since I think 2017. They put out two different reports about the success of Black women businesses and the fact that Black women were the fastest growing entrepreneurship group in America. And to me, since 2016, Black women have been the business owners that have kept America going, like straight up, that's a fact. And so because of this, I was very interested in see what would happen in this pandemic to Black women, in particular, business owners, and where the success would be at. For instance, my auntie owns the oldest Black bookstore in New York, Sisters Uptown Bookstore, and so probably it's gone 21 years. Anecdotally, my cousin said this is the first time they've seen that much money in their bank account. It's a small bookstore. It's 800 square feet. It's on 156 in Amsterdam, which is not considered, back in the day, wasn't considered the best spot to be in Harlem. And so she's had to struggle. But because of Black Lives Matter and because of everybody's renewed interest in Black books and Black history, she and a lot of Black bookstores are, she has to hire 5 people. I believe Marcus Bookstore, which is the oldest Black bookstore in America, has finally got a website. So on the other side of this pandemic, to what the business owner who just spoke about IHOPs and her franchises and the success that she has done herself, I'm seeing Black businesses seeing what was happening and pivot almost instantaneously. For instance, you have Jasmine Crow, who created an app called Gooder app, that's GOODR in Atlanta, raised $2 million 2 years ago to create software that lets her reclaim food that's wasted. And she farms out that software as a service to cities. She started a food drive that garnered about $200,000 in funds almost overnight, and then started feeding a lot of people in Georgia and Atlanta in areas that there was no food coming to at all. They were just out. The stores were closed because of what was considered rioting, and there was no food whatsoever. So that's one example. Another example is about 98 Black businesses, 98 Black businesses have joined together to do what's called a sales challenge. The goal is to sell between $2 million to $10 million in 7 days. And there's been a bunch of those. So I see us, our community, as a community that's resilient. And yes, we are facing sometimes insurmountable challenges. And definitely the money is not there for us. But to everyone's point, the money has never been there for us. So I don't really see this, and being somebody in the startup world, being there in New York in the 90s when Silicon Alley was created and working with Black Planet and Omar Wasu, there was never money. The dot-com bubble happened, and how many Black, dot-commers made money before the dot-com bubble? So, this is not something new.
Right.
To me, we're true to this. We have dealt with pandemic after pandemic after pandemic after pandemic, crack, HIV, disparities, that's our middle name. And so because of that, I'm very interested in seeing during this time, I believe Angela Benton, she was trying to raise $100,000 and she raised almost $1 million on WeFunder during the pandemic. So, and that's not coming from white folks, who believed in her software and wanted to invest in her company. So I really urge folks to look at this as an opportunity in particular. And I think that the solution is one of the things that I've been telling people to do is join this group called Traffic, Sales, and Profit. Profits, PROFIT on Facebook. And in that group, there are entrepreneurs and business owners who every day, I didn't realize today, or yesterday rather, LinkedIn is now allowing you to create a newsletter to all your followers instantaneously. Those are tips and tricks that business owners are putting together themselves to, FUBU, for us and by us. We are the solution.
Let me open this up, Representative, and everyone else too. Feel free to jump in on the conversation. We're going to open it up and start talking about getting to that phase of solutions and how do we become more resilient. Martin makes a very good point that disparity is our middle name, or our community's middle name. So Representative, going to you in terms of because there's something very different about this time compared to previous times or previous struggles or crises that we've been through, right? Something very different 55 years later after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, where we went from very few Black elected officials to now thousands in positions like yours, like where you're chairing major committees that oversee these types of issues and problems. And so what does the policy prescription framework look like to you? What are you working on right now as far as reviving Black business?
Thanks for that question, Charles. And yes, there are a lot more of us in office right now. But the one thing that I will stress is that it's a power struggle for us. The system, just like the system we're talking about around business, wasn't designed for us. It's not friendly to us. Neither is this political or governmental system, especially as the good sister Adina noted, Black women in particular, right? So we have always been the birthers of movements and nations, but we struggle the most when it comes to being able to exert the power that we've been endowed with. For me as the labor chair, I mean, we're actually I'm working with some senators and bonding chairs around something we're calling Renaissance Zone legislation. And this is something that we're putting together in the hopes of, an overarching goal of the legislation is to provide organizational structure and resources to build community, right? And generational wealth in Black communities and Latino communities and poor white communities, where we know we've been disenfranchised, and I will say on purpose, just like we've been redlined, the communities that we live in have been coined ghettos and hoods. We've taken the neighbor out of what we consider to be community. And we want to address the race-based economic disinvestment and discrimination that happens in communities of color, particularly Black communities, because no matter what you're talking, when we talk about communities of color, I need for us to be specific and to be clear that at the end of the day, right, Black people and Black businesses, Black anything is at the bottom of that barrel. So we want to establish this Renaissance Zone legislation in the three major cities that are mostly impacted and have most of the poverty, which would be New Haven, Bridgeport, and Hartford. And this legislation is going to be like to construct new zones for housing, to address education, owner occupancy, capital for small businesses, like really put in the resources and the opportunities in our neighborhoods so that we can wake up and go to work in our neighborhoods, right? Our children can have jobs and create jobs in our neighborhoods. So that is the hope of this Renaissance Zones legislation that we're currently working on, Charles.
And Representative, let me ask you real quick, because we did have a question from an audience member, Ronald Gregg, and he was saying, how can we increase contract opportunities for Black businesses immediately? And so you being, in the state legislature, that's always been a problem, even before pandemic. And I definitely wanted to get to that question, but since we have a viewer who's raising it now, with that, I assume that's a struggle too. We're talking about slim budgets, but then it was already a problem before pandemic.
Right.
City, local governments, federal government, always being reticent to provide those contract and procurement opportunities for Black businesses.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going to, as far as I can see in the near future, it's going to continue to be a problem until we change who is actually leading these businesses, these causes, making contracts. We're going to be at a disadvantage. But in this legislation that I'm talking about, the Renaissance Zones legislation, we are actually looking to use bonding that has already been approved. So we're not talking new dollars, because we know when we start talking about helping the folks that look like us, the vulnerable people that need the most help, it's always an issue of we don't have the funding, we don't have any money. So we've come up with the idea for the state to actually, over 10 years, $100 million capital investment to be authorized from bonding that's already been approved. So this is not new money. We've also tapped the treasurer here in the state, because he has the ability to give money for small businesses. So we're going to tap those funds. I think we just have to get more creative around how we look at resources and where
Yeah.
they actually are, because many of the resources that we're seeking, I would dare to say, are in our communities to start with.
Yeah.
And contracting is going to have to be addressed. It's a problem here and nationally. You know, minority business, we know that that includes white women, and white women come into the scene under the guise of their husbands and white male counterparts representing them so that they can qualify for these funds. And that has been something that we struggle with and we will continue to address. And we're asking for specific funds specifically for Black businesses. We are not looking to fund, you know, white female businesses. We want money for truly minority businesses. When we say minorities, we're talking Black and brown businesses.
And Jill,
Charles, can I jump in? I'm sorry. Can I just
sure,
jump
sure,
in
go
on
ahead.
this one just because? So my agency has a government contract, has multiple government contracts right now. So we're contracted with the state of New Jersey to market and provide outreach for the grants that they're rolling out. So they're rolling out, the state has been rolling out a series of grants targeting small businesses with 25 employees or fewer. And so they did an RFP, and we competed for the RFP and we got the contract. And so one of the things I want to say is I think it's really important that we are unapologetic, as the representative stated, that we're unapologetic in asking for specific carve-outs. That's number one. The other thing is we need to get the word out to Black businesses to ensure that people know. New York is doing a tremendous job with this, and New Jersey is working on it, and the representative can speak to Connecticut. But there are contracts that you can get as a Black business owner from the local and state governments that, as long as they're under a certain amount of money, it only requires 3 quotes. It does not require a big, gigantic RFP. You just have to give a proposal and it's 3 quotes. And they just have to pick the lowest, most responsive, most responsible bidder. So you can actually be a higher bidder, but if you're the most responsive and the most responsible, then they can pick you. There are also contracts that you can get in states. In New York, their threshold is really high. I don't remember off the top of my head, where basically the state and the city can say, we're just going to give you this contract. And New York, it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they can just say, we're going to give you this contract. So we need to make sure that all of the states have that kind of discretion, because the corruption isn't coming from the contracts that are $500,000 or fewer, right? That's not where the issues are coming from. And so that gives, as we have people in government, that gives them the discretion to be able to ensure that they're offering opportunity that's equal opportunity, right? So because people can get, let's have a real conversation. People can create these RFPs in a way to specifically disqualify people. And they do that. And they do that across this country. And so we have to understand how the system works. And then we have to have processes that we advocate for from a policy perspective that address those issues. And so to me, having a threshold, a higher threshold, and I believe in New York, it might even be $500,000. Someone can say, here, business owner, you demonstrated an ability to perform this task, and you have a special, because first of all, if these programs are being marketed to smaller businesses, then who better to market it to the smaller businesses and to the Black businesses than a Black person? And another point is, we've got McKinsey's of the world. Yeah, I name check them. These big consulting firms that have now created platforms where they're going to help solve these structural issues that we know have been around for centuries, right? And so they're now trying to compete with small businesses like me to do this work, right? So so we have to be intentional and make sure that our community knows how to access these resources, that they can meet with people, put a package together, demonstrate, just like everybody else is doing, because be clear, everybody else is already doing this, so that they can meet with government, market their services and demonstrate how they can help with a particular opportunity. So that's one thing, raising that threshold where it doesn't require an RFP, where there's discretion to ensure that we have equal access. So that's one thing. Making people aware of, again, I'm just recapping it, making people aware of what's already in place at the state level that you can access without a lot of extraneous paperwork, because a lot of it is extraneous, to be clear.
Right.
So I think those are the two pieces. And then in the places where we don't have this, we have to have policies that address it.
And, Jillian, step in here. So we had the Paycheck Protection Program that was roundly criticized as an epic failure. And then also we have some of these traditional sources of financing from the banking sector, from the banks, and then we're seeing banks like Bank of America, PNC, for example, they each announced over $1 billion in investments, and or saying or claiming that they will invest in Black-owned businesses or Black-run business projects. And so, is that enough? I know that we know with the PPP program, like I think it was just less than a quarter of eligible Black businesses got their hands on some PPP funding, and in a lot of cases that wasn't even enough. So how do we leverage now, like what Tara was just saying, particularly when we have like these big firms, these big banks, folks in the financial sector, they're saying, especially in this Black Lives Matter moment, we're stepping in, we hear you, we're going to do something much different. But all these centuries, they hadn't been doing anything different before. So anything changing, and how do we leverage this moment if it is really truly there?
So, and thank you for the question. I think that, yes, this is the time to draw down from all of this goodwill that's being spread currently. I mentioned a little earlier that our funders were so quick to respond to the needs that they believe was going on, that it was needed on the ground in our communities, that we served as a conduit because we knew exactly who on the ground needed the funding. They gave us direct over $250,000 to get directly into the hands of our entrepreneurs, into their pockets for their needs and support. So what we have been finding is that our current funders and others are really wanting to hear from us what is needed. Like, so tell us what you need. And so for me, back to Tara's point around the, either access to government contracts or just anchor institutions supporting local small businesses, right? We need to be able to say, here is the portfolio of businesses that are available. We know that the needs are for a Prudential in Newark or Goldman Sachs in Jersey City, that they need paper clips. And if it's the paperclip, there's nobody supplying paperclips that are a minority business or Black-owned business, let's create a business that can provide it. So we've got to figure out what the strategy is to get our entrepreneurs in, under the radar. If the radar is 3 quotes at $17,000 per, contract, you just keep those going until you build your financial resources in order to make more of an impact in your communities. But I'm a believer. I'm not only the executive director of Rising Tide Capital. I'm also a graduate of the program, and in 2009, I graduated from their Community Business Academy, and I started a food cooperative. And I'm a believer in the cooperative business model as a way for Black people specifically to pool our resources to make impact for everyone in community. I come from the Caribbean. We pool our monies in a susu that's rotated, and we fund our projects on the ground in our own communities. And so I think that the information that we share, there are folks that look like us in these governmental spaces that need to make sure that on the ground, the information is shared, as Tara said, but also we have to figure out how we are growing our own pride, growing our own communities around in business and in housing. I'm a grassroots organizer by training, and the housing space is where all of our wealth is lost. If we are not really holding ourselves accountable on the ground, we got to do for ourselves first before we can really ask for them to do anything for us. So I say all that to say that PayPal has definitely come to, ask Rising Tide Capital what they can do to support our 93% minority entrepreneurs. Those are primarily Black business owners, and we are going to tell them, and we're going to tell them what the money is going to be used for and what we actually need right now.
Adina, your thoughts on like how to scale up like that self-reliance model, right? That like how Julian was describing what happens in the Caribbean, and you being from Liberia, right? And so, you know, you do hear quite a bit about like the need to sort of tap into Black diaspora models as far as like the cooperative business development, cooperative entrepreneurship and innovation. How can that be scaled up, you know, in a time like this?
It's already there.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I get so frustrated when people talk to Black businesses about self-reliance.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me right now? If you're looking at a group of people that have been, I don't know any group on this earth that have been more self-reliant than the Black entrepreneur, okay? Mm-hmm. We have been so instrumental. Two books, two things I want people on this call today to do is read The Color of Money, and secondly, read the Federal Reserve. Read the Federal Reserve that just came out called Double Jeopardy that I participated in on the effects of banks in the Black community. Bank as an institution have been more impactful in non-existent in the Black community. The only time banks have been interested in doing anything for the Black community is when lawmaker made them. And even then, they find a way to weasel a backdoor kind of way to benefit more than the community do, okay? So back to your question about self-reliance, you're looking at somebody that I have businesses that generate over $10 million in revenue. I still have anxiety in going to a traditional lender for loans, right? And even if they do loan me those money, I am scrutinized. I am nitpicked. They do it grudgingly, right? So, but besides, and despite all of that, we soldier through. We do what we got to do to start up our businesses. So Black entrepreneur is the definition of self-reliance, of self-resilience. We do it all. We serve the community. Sometimes we do it with having multiple jobs. I am also in the real estate development space, right? So PPP and the pandemic have done more to increase the gap wealth in this country. And we cannot stay silent. We have to speak up now. Do not wait until 10 years from now when the reports come out about, oh, this is the impact of PPP. No, we have to start having those conversations right now as lawmakers are making decisions today. We have to highlight the systematic discrimination against Black and brown entrepreneurs and Black and brown communities in this country.
Let me ask you something real quick, Adina. Let me ask you something real quick. Do you feel like you have that direct connection to the policymakers to address those concerns to make that happen? Yeah. I pose that.
And I'll answer that question in two ways.
Question to everyone here too, and can chime in a little bit later on. Right.
I'll answer that question in twofold. I used to subscribe to this model of silence. Adina, just struggle, keep your mouth shut. People don't want to really learn about you having struggle getting loan from a bank. People don't want to understand that you don't have money to cover your employee payroll. Just be quiet, suffer in silence. Ooh. But I realized I was doing a disservice to the next women, the women of color coming up in business, that we shouldn't speak up. Do I have access to my lawmaker? I make sure I have access to them. I'm not waiting for anyone to give me access to them. I will make sure I create an ecosystem where my struggles is highlighted enough so they understand that this is not something that happened 50 years ago. These are struggles that are still happening today. So if I don't say anything else on this call, I want Black businesses to start speaking up now.
And demanding.
Martin, I saw you nodding there too, as far as like that connection with policymakers, making sure that they address those demands. what that infrastructure, what that framework should look like. Can you hear us, Martin?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at the city by city, or even state by state, but really city by city. Since 2010, I've been tracking what Black people do in 35 cities. And so a city like Atlanta, I spoke earlier about Jasmine. She's able to get a contract with the city of Los Angeles and the city of Chicago, but she has not been successfully been able to get a contract within the city that she resides, which is Atlanta, for her software to help reclaim wasted food. And so I think city by city, it varies. It's in a framework of success or solution model is exactly what what I think that has to happen from at least a council of state government's perspective. Is these type of convenings need to be done in a city by city situation. So with Philadelphia, for instance, we have access to our local officials. In fact, I got 2 calls Wednesday from 2 different officials wanting me to be on a conference call covering exactly this conversation. And so I know that in Philadelphia, there is an intentionality that's happening, but I don't, as a New Yorker who was there for almost 30 some years, I would, just going to say it. Charlie Rango, absolutely not. Inez Dinkins, absolutely not. Now, the new generation that's coming in New York, hopefully that's the case. But there were a lot, Oakland, yes. So I think it's city by city. And it definitely depends. I think one of the things that business owners, we haven't done well is we haven't really asked our customers to become politically active. I think that's something that as business owners, we've been, as spoken of earlier, suffering in silence. And look, being politically active and going to local city council meetings, going to local board meetings. Now, I'm not talking about the national stuff, or even I'm talking about local stuff. The community board meetings, especially in a city like New York, or even a smaller town, that's where the deals are done. The deals are done right there in that local community board meeting. And as business owners, we try to get there because it's like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, but it's hard and we're tired and everything like that. But we have great customers, and we haven't necessarily activated our customer base to be advocates for us. So I think that's one of the things that we can definitely do.
Right. Let me throw in a question here from an audience member, Jason Coles of shopcatica.com. Can someone speak about government turning old schools and old factories into condos and housing rather than jobs? Schools were paid for by the public and then decades later sold to private developers, which speeds up gentrification. And so someone wants to address that, want to jump in on that. Representative? Go ahead, Adina.
I'll take it because I've been a developer where I was awarded an old hospital. And what I did was demolish that old hospital and put affordable housing. Right now we're working about 600,000. When that project is all done, it's gonna be 600 apartments, mixture of senior affordable housing. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking old abandoned building and turning them over to developers. What I am concerned with is who are those developers? Right? What I am concerned is, are we favoring the old school, same old, been done 30 years kind of developer that now tie into the banking CRA requirement? Because one thing you have to remember is you have banks out there that are looking to invest in Black communities, but now with Black entrepreneurs, right? So the backdoor kind of way they take the CRA, which has been a flap, they take the CRA and say, I need my CRA rating to be a certain number. So I'm going to take $20 million and give it to some developer that's not of this community, but I'm going to get my rating because that developer is developing that money in Newark, right? Or say Irvington. the bank do two things. They get their CRA rating, they give it to someone where they feel safe with, someone they've been having a relationship with for 20, 30 years, but that did not move the needle in the Black community at all. All it did was put a new building in the Black community. Nobody from that community benefited from that building going up, right? That's why I need policymakers to be really smart when they're making these policies. Because if you don't know the history of the struggle of the Black community, there's so many information right out there right now about how this system has been built disproportionately to disenfranchise the Black community. The Black dollar, the Black investment dollar not being reinvested back in the communities by the same bank. So I need Black policymakers to know these things. So when they are making these decisions, these policies, they have a point of reference. Because if you don't know history of this country, you cannot effect real change going forward.
Right. Let me real quick. I think we're almost coming up on the 11 o'clock hour. We may take a little bit of time. I just want to check in with the panelists. We may go like maybe about 15 minutes over, if that's okay with you, to make sure we can.
I can't. I have a hard stop. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You have a hard stop. Who has a hard stop? Oh, y'all have okay. Well, we only have like a few more minutes.
Right.
Have a few more minutes.
Charles, I just want to piggyback off of Dina for a minute. First of all, I'm very grateful for everybody on this panel. But Queen Adina, I want to salute you because you are exactly what we need to have access to. And when I say we, I'm talking about, lawmakers. It's one thing to know the history. You're dead on with that. The unfortunate thing that I can tell you, especially with this, we just passed the police accountability bill here in Connecticut, one of the most progressive bills that's been passed. I can't even begin to tell you the suffering that we endured, the Black and Puerto Rican caucus, the Black and Puerto Rican members of that legislature, what we've been subjected to, rehashing history, giving our testimonies, opening wounds and re-traumatizing ourselves. We know the history. The struggle in the building, and I'm talking about state buildings, is getting white people to let go of their privilege and let go of their power and allow us to lead. When all of this happened, it was, what can we do? I need you to trust me as a Black woman in America with lived experience. I need you to trust that not only do I know what to do, but when I do it, it's going to benefit all of us, because when you lift from the bottom, everyone is elevated. So we need not just advocates, as Martin said, that like your customer base, the people you do business with need to be in these buildings and in these spaces. They need to email, they need to call, they need to make their power known, because people have power and we have more people than we do rich folks. And this has been the battle with politics. So, elected officials, enough of them, I want to say, do know the history and understand it, but the real struggle is in getting people to give up their power and to stand with you and to walk the walk, because they're going to talk it. They'll get out there in front of press and say all the right things. But when it's time to hit that button, you will know them by their vote. And I stand by that. So you're absolutely right. And we need to change who is in leadership. That's the other thing. Like the body is going to do what the head tells it to do. And if they don't have this lived experience, which they don't, right? White woman does not have the experience that you have as a business owner, has not had to do and make the sacrifices that you've had to make as a Black woman business owner, feeding your community, meeting people, and bridging the gap in all kinds of ways, and still staying afloat, still making a profit, still being able to open your doors every day. So I just wanted to get that in. I really want to acknowledge you and the strength that you have brought to this panel, and what you have said resonate. And I don't want you to think that it is falling on deaf ears. I wish you were here in Connecticut with me. Thank you.
Well, she is a restaurateur, so maybe we can make that happen.
We can absolutely make that happen. We came up on, I know it's 11 o'clock and folks have the hard break. I get a feeling we're going to have to do a part 2 on this discussion, and we're going to try to do it real soon. We'll put it together. State Representative Robin Porter represents the 94th Legislative District in the Connecticut House of Representatives. She's been joining us. She gets the last word. Adina Bayo, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Go to Adina Bayo, yourname.com for more information on your restaurant chain and what you're doing, the projects you're involved in. You can go to Adina Bayo, just you see her name, how it's spelled.com for more information on her. Also, Tara Dowdell of the Tara Dowdell Group has been joining us as well. Go to taradowdellgroup.com for more information on her. Also, Jillian Sargent Allen, Executive Director of Rising Tide Capital. You can go to Rising Tide, is it risingtide.org?
Capital.org.
risingtidecapital.org for more information there. Martin Pratt, also of Philly YBN at LMJ Pratt on social media. Also, where are you? Where's Philly YBN, Martin?
Sorry, PhillyYourBlackNews.com.
PhillyYourBlackNews.com. So get more information there. Debbie and Paige also want to thank her once again for making these possible. Thank you so much. We didn't get to all the questions. Really appreciate audience members who chimed in. We'll get to your questions through another. We're going to be sharing this via social media and a number of other platforms. Continue to check in at thebenote.com and also the Council of State Governments Eastern Regional Conference website, csg-erc.org, and go to the Council on Communities of Color. I'm Charles Ellis, and I've been your host moderator for these Equity Gap Micro Summit installments. We have more coming at you. We have a new season, a fresh season of Equity Gap Micro Summits brought to you by CSG CCC, and we're really eager to present them to you. So you will be hearing from us. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your afternoon.
Bye, thank you.
And have a fantastic weekend as well. We'll be talking soon. Take care.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Still live. It's still live.